like a Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another review, and it's PlayStation action, this time in the form of the first ever 3D WWF wrestling game. I'm talking about WWF Warzone, which saw release in July of 1998 on the PlayStation in North America, followed by an August 1998 release over here in the PAL region. So, previously on the PlayStation, we'd seen WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, and WWF In Your House, but these games were strictly 2D and very similar in terms of gameplay to Mortal Kombat. They weren't realistic in any way, shape, or form, and WWF Warzone brought in a new era really in wrestling games. We'd seen a few 3D wrestling games before this, but WWF Warzone was really one that I felt helped revolutionize the wrestling games on the home consoles. So like always, we're going to be talking about how it looks, how it sounds, how it plays, content and lifespan, and whether it's still worth playing today. So like always, we're going to start with visuals first, and for a mid-1998 game, and the fact that it was the first WWF game that was in 3D, it was actually the best looking 3D wrestling game on the market at that time. The character models were really decent, they were easily recognizable for who they were supposed to be represented. All of the outfits that the wrestlers wore as well were absolutely spot on, and I was really impressed at the time the game came out in this regard. In terms of the arenas though, not quite as good because they feel quite lifeless and dead in all fairness. The fans aren't really that noticeable. It feels like you're in a small indie show or something and not this big multi-million pound wrestling company. And it wasn't till a lot later in wrestling games when we sort of got this complete presentation package. Now in terms of the animations of the moves, they're pretty good as well because all the moves look pretty much spot on in my opinion, and it's progressed so much since the world of the 2D wrestling games just only a couple of years before, so it's spot on in that regard. The collision detection though probably isn't so great, and I think that comes down to the fact that obviously wrestlers are different sizes and physiques, so it was really hard at this point in time to get that spot on. And as well as that, the game is a little bit glitchy in places. It's perhaps not the most robust of wrestling games, but it does perform pretty well. There's only little bits of slowdown here and there. So overall, for the time period that it came out, I feel WWF Warzone is a pretty decent looking game. So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and it's somewhat of a mixed affair here because we've got some actual great voiceovers for the wrestlers during the matches, and I really think they're pretty decent. Some of the things the commentary team of Vince McMahon and JR say, pretty good as well, especially when they're introducing the wrestlers and talking about them before you get into the ring. And of course you've got the fantastic theme tunes for the wrestlers. Remember back then, some of these wrestling themes were so good. They really were. Much better than a lot of the stuff that we hear nowadays in terms of the world of wrestling. But unfortunately, there's a few downsides as well, and that's mainly due to the fact that a lot of the time, the matches feel lifeless. They feel like the crowd are half asleep, and there's not really a whole lot occurring, even though you're beating somebody up in the ring. Now, of course, once you get the momentum going and you've got the fans behind you, they do start cheering, and it comes to life. But unfortunately, it only lasts for about 30 or 40 seconds, and then it goes back to being neutral. Another downside is the fact that when you win the match, you don't hear your wrestler's theme music play. In fact, you just see a still image of your character on the screen with a motion saying that you won by total blowout, etc. It's nothing that fills you with that sense of excitement that someone's just won a big match. So overall, the sound effects and music department is just somewhat of a mixed bag. But what I'm going to do is play you a few wrestlers themes so we can come out of this topic on a high. So moving on to the gameplay next, and you'll see each wrestler's got a health bar at the top, and they've got a damage bar underneath which displays how much damage the moves do. The basic input scheme is a punch, kick, block, grapple, and dodge buttons, which all sounds fine, but it's the combo-based system that is probably where people's opinion of the gameplay will differ, because it can be quite frustrating, I'm not going to lie. You need to memorize a lot of button combinations for all the different wrestlers to remember all of their moves, and it can be a little bit clunky, unfluid, unresponsive, because a lot of time you may need to pause, check the move list, see which moves you've got, because if your wrestler has it and then you play as a different wrestler, there's every chance, even if he's got the same move, you've got to input a different command to pull it off, and I feel this is frustrating, and that is a downside to the gameplay in all fairness, and it does hinder the enjoyment a little bit in all fairness. Now there's lots of moves on the game. For a game at this point in time, 1998, I feel the move variety is really good, and like I said previously, the moves look pretty decent as well. All the wrestlers have got their finishing moves and they all look pretty good, and once you get your opponent down into red HP, you can spam your finishing move over and over again and put a real beating on your opponent. Now in terms of the damage that you can cause, it's pretty much based by your wrestler's charisma, how easily they can get the fans to cheer for them, because once the fans are cheering for you, you can deal far more damage. For example, the fans are cheering, you use a weapon, you will do ×2 or ×3 damage, meaning you can whip through your opponent's HP really quick, get them into red HP, whack on your finishing move and beat them. Now you can make wrestlers submit as well. Once you put them in a submission hold, it's a case of spamming those buttons as fast as you can to try and get the submission bar to fill up and make them tap out, which is great because it adds a bit of variety to it. In the old WWF wrestling games on the Mega Drive, you simply just had to put them in the submission hold, and when they ran out of HP, they lost. So thankfully it's a little bit more realistic in all fairness, which is a good thing. But overall in the gameplay department, it's really just a question of whether you can adapt to the button combo system that's in place here. Now at the time, we didn't know any better really. It was one of the first 3D wrestling games on the market. When it came out, I adjusted to it. I thought it played absolutely fine. But going back playing it now, you realize it's just not very fluid, it's clunky, and it isn't that great to play in all fairness. So looking back now, gameplay perhaps not quite as good as we thought it was 25 years ago.
Farouk is definitely the aggressor. Great form. He put the hurt on Farouk.
So moving on to content and lifespan next, and we've got a challenge mode, a versus mode, a tag team mode, cage match and weapons match, with challenge mode being the main mode of play, where you start at the bottom of the rankings with your character, try and work your way up to the top to become the WWF champion. All the other modes of play there are all individual exhibition matches. Now in terms of the roster, it's not the biggest. We haven't even got 20 characters here. You can unlock Dude Love and Cactus Jack and a few other generic characters to players as well, but it's definitely not a very big roster. What you can do though is view the biographies for all the characters within the game, where it shows you the statistics that they've been given on the game, which I feel are a little bit iffy if I'm perfectly honest. It shows you their finishing moves, whether they're a fan favorite or a heel as well, so that is a nice touch. As well as that, we've got the creator wrestler, where you can go in there, make yourself your own freak, make them ridiculously huge or really skinny, whatever you want, give them a name, assign them a moveset, although you can't actually give them individual moves, you have to just simply give them a moveset from one of the characters already in the game, and then you can use that character to play as, which is always amusing, I'm not going to lie. And to be fair, creator wrestler was still in its infancy when WWF Warzone came out, and it wasn't until later wrestling games where they sort of became more in-depth and you could give them all the individual moves and taunts and everything that goes with that. So I can't really criticize the game for it, because to be fair, it was quite innovative at the time. Obviously, the different kinds of matches, the cage match and the weapons match, do add a little bit of variety, and you can go into the cheat menu and unlock various other things when you win the WWF title with different characters, and I'm not going to lie, that will take a long time to do. If you wanted to play through this as every single character to win the WWF title and unlock every single little extra within the game, it will take quite a long time. So there's a substantial amount of content here, in all fairness, for you to unlock and play through. I think the big question is whether you could actually live with the sort of combo-based input system and not get tired of it to actually unlock all of that content. So like always, that is going to leave us with two final questions, I guess, because we are going to have a PlayStation Top 10 slowly forming as well. In terms of is Warzone still worth playing today? Well, that will really depend on your nostalgia for the game and your nostalgia for the wrestlers within the game. If you played this game and enjoyed it back then, you may like revisiting it to experience it one more time. But the likelihood is, if you've played lots of wrestling games since then, you simply won't enjoy the combo-based gameplay. I find that myself, even though I played this game right on its release, going back and playing it now just isn't that enjoyable in all fairness. It feels clunky, it's not very fluid, not just in the way it performs in the matches, but the actual overall game, because there's quite a lot of loading times as well. So I feel that really kind of drags its enjoyment down. Now, where does it feature? In our very, very small PlayStation ranking. In fact, we've only reviewed 2 games for the PlayStation so far on the channel, and they're Hardcore 4x4 and Pro Evolution Soccer. In terms of where does WWF Warzone rank with those, it comes in number 2, because Pro Evolution Soccer is by far the best game of the 3 we've looked at, and Hardcore 4x4 is the worst of the 3. So WWF Warzone is in there at number 2. Like I said, it's not a terrible game, and you can get used to it. Once you get used to the combo-based gameplay, it just does not play as well as so many other wrestling games that came out not long after it. But of course, these are just my opinions, and my opinions alone. What did you feel about WWF Warzone when it came out? How do you feel about it now? How do you think it compared to all those other wrestling games that came out around about this time? We had WCW NWO Revenge not long after this. Then we had WWF Attitude, which was a sequel to this, WWF SmackDown, WWF No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, all of those games. So there was loads of wrestling games back then to pick from. Obviously, my favourites were WrestleMania 2000 and, of course, WWF No Mercy. Let me know your thoughts on WWF Warzone down below. And like always, I'll be back in the near future with another review. Goodbye for now.